Show me all the blueprints. It's a huge success.
I came across a really, really interesting business opportunity.
Beyond the Blueprints. Hi, it's Cailey Heaps. Welcome to Beyond the Blueprints. Today we're chatting with Mark Cohon. Mark is a very interesting man and dear friend. He's had various roles, NBA, Commissioner of the CFL. He's in the midst of writing a book or pitching a book. He is involved in Toronto Global, bringing investment to our great city. I could go on for ages, but instead, just take a listen. Hi, it's Cailey Heaps. We're here today with Mark Cohon, who is a friend first.
Yes, absolutely.
And a very influential person in our city. So
no, come on.
I'm laughing. So the first time I met you, I don't know if you remember this, you hosted the grade 3 class party at your house.
Oh, that was whooping. Yeah, we were doing
raging.
shots. It was crazy. No.
And I came in and I said, oh, and I understand you're head of the NHL. And you were like, nope, that's not me.
No. I don't look like Gary Bettman, I don't think.
Anyway, I had just gotten the letters all confused, but at the time you were commissioner for the CFL.
Right.
And from there, now you're with Taste Toronto, is that
No,
right?
it's going to Well, I do so many different things.
Okay.
Now. So chair of Toronto Global.
Toronto Global, that's
yes,
it. Sorry.
I just stepped down as chairing the Junos for 7 years. I've involved in a spirits company. I'm on the board of Great Canadian. I'm writing a book. I'm about to maybe chair another sports league. So,
wow.
With Parker, that's gone a long time from that grade 3. My daughter Parker now is in first year university in Miami. So time flies.
It does. Time flies. Yeah. Our girls are in first year. Okay. So Toronto Global, you're chairing, and that is to bring investors to Toronto. Is that right?
So it was set up 7 years ago. I'm just about to announce a new chair. So I'm going through my own transitions now, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
But the idea was Toronto had all these amazing things going for it. If you think 6-7 years ago, the safest city in the world, one of the greenest cities in the world, the fastest growing city in North America, if you think about it, the most cranes at any one time in any city in the world. I remember when we were doing the Amazon bid for the HQ2, we had like 120 cranes in the city. So all these things were going on in Toronto, but Toronto did a really poor job of selling itself.
Yes.
So they created Toronto Global, 3 levels of government, the feds, the province, and the mayor at the time, Mayor Tory, to promote Toronto around the world and bring in foreign direct investment. So I've chaired that organization for 7 years. It's amazing. We've attracted over 250 companies from around the world to set up headquarters here, regional headquarters.
Wow.
$3 billion in investment, over 30,000 jobs, and over $800 million in taxes. So,
that's huge.
There's a lot of people complain about what's going on in Toronto, but I tell you, from a world perspective, people are still looking to Toronto as a great city to set up operations. So it'd be interesting to talk a little bit more about people's perception of Toronto, what's happening. I think sometimes we get down on ourselves, but there's a lot of good things happening here too.
I think Toronto's a great city. I think the two pieces that people talk to me about, is it really a global city? And does our federal tax policy truly encourage business to come to Canada?
Yeah.
And I'm in the YPO, which I know you used to be. And I know when the recent conversation started about capital gains and the implications of same, there was a lot of people saying, okay, that's it. I'm taking my company. I'm getting out of Canada.
Right.
So is that one of the challenges? That's right. But is that a challenge you've seen?
I think there's a couple of things. I think sort of the corporate tax rate is still competitive. So in terms of companies coming to set up in Toronto versus the United States, we still tend to be competitive. I think, I look at it this way, and listen, we all have to pay our taxes. I used to live in New York City. I lived in California. I have relatives in both. At the highest tax rate, you're at 54% if you're living in LA. You're at the same rate in New York City. So it's expensive in these major global cities.
Yes.
Am I happy about the capital gains? No, because what I didn't like is that for entrepreneurs like yourself, or some of the entrepreneurial things that I've done or my family have done, they've sort of, made us the bad guys.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't like.
Which I just talked about this.
And I don't think that's right when, we're taking risks, we're employing people, we're putting mortgages out on our homes to create these type of opportunities, and you don't think about that risk. At the same time, do I think a lot of people are going to pack up and leave?
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think you get that every time.
Yeah.
But I don't like that policy. I'm not happy with it, but I still think I still think companies are still coming to Toronto
Yeah.
because of the amazing talent we have. If you think of the
Yes.
12 universities or the universities surrounding Toronto,
Yeah.
90,000, like the largest urban school in North America with 90,000 kids at University of Toronto.
It's amazing.
Some of the best AI talent in the world. Companies are setting up operations here because they need talent, and that's why they're coming here still.
And I think we have amazing talent, and our immigration policy brings incredible educated people to our country that we can all benefit from.
And that happened, that was a big benefit when Trump was president as well. That a lot of people came here because we have an expedited visa that tech companies can bring in their employees in 3 to 4 weeks. So I think that makes a big difference as well. But listen, Toronto has its challenges, like any major city. I mean, Richard Florida, who lives around the corner from here, he talks about when you start to become a mega city, when you start to get over 5 million people, and you think the surrounding area that Toronto Global represents 6.5 million, when you tie in Hamilton and Waterloo and the Golden, the sort of the Horseshoe, you're over 8 million people. So
it's a lot of people.
So you get these infrastructure problems, you get these housing problems, and unfortunately we're behind the 8 ball, but I think they're doing things to catch up.
Yeah, and I think that I recently was speaking to Niall, who's a friend of ours, who's genius about development and how to grow our city, and I was interested to hear that he is in the city's listening, which is nice. So I feel like, we're not finally, but we're in a place where we're more open to solutions.
Right. I know, I think John Love spoke to the mayor and pushed the mayor about the whole issue of the Gardner and getting them to work around the clock.
Yes.
To expedite that. So hopefully it's done before the World Cup in 2026.
Yes, hopefully.
I do think we need a little bit more of that entrepreneurial can-do, like construction on our highways, like, if you go to India, you go to China, you go to any of these countries, maybe because the cost of labor is cheaper, it's nonstop work. Like
24 hours.
We should figure out a model where we're constant, like those infrastructure plays are constantly being worked on around the clock.
Yeah. It doesn't seem, do you know that this is what my dad always tells me when I'm renovating houses. He said, Cailey, that they built Maple Leaf Gardens in 1 year?
Oh.
And I think, okay, well, if they can do that in 1 year,
yes,
surely we can build a highway.
But in our house, you're more demanding, so I don't know.
Exactly. Very high.
Look at this.
Stress. I want to go back to something that you said. So, do you feel like the wealthy are villainized in Canada?
I won't. Here, I do think we suffer. So I'm a dual citizen. So born in Chicago, moved to Canada when I was 2 years old with my parents, not by myself.
Yes.
So I have a little bit of both that. I mean, the American entrepreneur and the Canadian, maybe a little bit more conservative on some elements of business. In the United States, there's the Horatio Alger Award, which the U.S. government gives out to entrepreneurs and successful people in their lives. And I feel in the U.S., they build people up and they honor those successful people.
Yes.
I think in Canada, we're a little bit British, where you have the tall poppy syndrome. Yeah. If you get a little too tall, if you get a little too big, sometimes we whack you down. And I think that's not great. So do I feel we're villainized? No, I don't think there's a class warfare, but I think you got to be, I think everyone has to be conscious. I think the friends that we have, we do our bit in terms of building our community. We're out there helping. Whether it's giving money, giving our time, pushing politicians on issues. I think we are engaged in making our community stronger. So when there is a little bit of that rhetoric, it's not a healthy rhetoric for people to use. And I think that was wrapped a little bit in the capital gains tax initiative, which I don't think was right. And I think there was blowback for it. I don't think it's going to change, but I think people didn't feel good about that.
Yeah.
I didn't feel good about it.
No. And I think to your point, we all, those of us who employ other people and who've grown businesses, there's so much risk in what we do. Mm-hmm. And we could wake up tomorrow and have lost a lot.
Yeah, I've been in businesses where I thought, it's going well, and then it turns and it's gone.
And it's gone.
I mean, think about COVID. I had many friends in COVID who had successful businesses that were gone overnight, just a little bankrupt. And so I think we have to be conscious about that dialogue. We are so fortunate. We're lucky, to live in the heart of a city that is growing so fast. So there's not many. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in San Francisco. I've lived in London. I've lived in Chicago.
Wow.
I've done work in 40 countries around the world when I was at Major League Baseball and the NBA. And I think of Toronto, like this is pretty unique. You don't have these type of neighborhoods and the ability to live right within a city in what is, beautiful green outdoors, the most ravine systems out of any city in the world. So I think we're lucky too.
Yeah, we have freedom of movement. Like if I think about your daily life, my daily life.
Yes.
I can walk to your house and see your amazing wife in 10
Yeah.
minutes. We can walk down to Yorkville and have a coffee. There's all these things that don't exist in a lot of cities.
Yeah. But again, we're lucky too, because there are people who have to jump on the subway, and our subway system is, I used to live in London and you could go anywhere
on the tube. Yeah.
So, and we are behind, they're building the Ontario line now. I don't know when the Eglinton line is going to open. Those will make differences for most citizens of the city.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think we are very lucky. I think it's luck and hard work is where people achieve true success. But I think that the other thing that I think about all the time is there's nothing I wouldn't do to help someone else achieve that same success. And I know that to be true about you as well.
It's fun mentoring younger people too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in watching someone, some of the proudest things I've done in my business aren't even about money. It's watching someone learn the business and grow their own life and now have complete financial freedom. And those are the things that are so great. Yeah. But I think that when people are critical of success, they sometimes lack that lens of it's not just us sitting at home drinking coffee and having cocktails. Like, there's a lot that goes into it.
A lot of stress that goes into it.
Yeah. So you mentioned a book. So talk to us about that.
So it's interesting. So almost a year ago, my father passed away. He was George Cohon, very iconic Canadian, the man who brought McDonald's to Russia, the guy who brought McDonald's to Canada, founded the Ronald McDonald House. And we actually have the unveiling of his tombstone tomorrow, which is interesting.
Oh,
so so the family's all getting together tomorrow. So interesting time in this discussion. And I was preparing my eulogy for Dad, and I was really thinking a lot about the way he was. Like, he was the ultimate Sam Walton front counter guy. He interacted with everyone. He would break bread with people. He, when I would talk to him, Dad, on his deathbed, and I said, Dad, what are you most proud of? Is it, building McDonald's in Canada or Russia? He said, no, Mark, it was leveraging McDonald's to do good in the world. He leveraging the company to do good. So he had so many of these principles about how he treated people, everyone the same, how he would break bread with people, how he would talk to all the customers, how he would do good in the world, we had a saying in our family called roots and wings. You would give your kids like a strong foundation and the wings to fly.
Oh, that's a great saying.
Build some resiliency in us and, a little bit of toughness. So I thought about all those attributes he had. And then I thought about where we are in the world today, where, in the United States, the Surgeon General talks about an epidemic of loneliness brought on by COVID, but people not working in the offices anymore. The lack of civility, probably a lot to do with the political process. It's amazing. 60 years ago, the average mealtime a family had in the United States was 90 minutes. It's now 12 today.
Oh my gosh.
In front of a television. So people aren't having meals with their kids. They're not connecting anymore. So, and there's so many more other examples of that. And even young people, tired of dating apps and, going away from them to try to reconnect with people. So this book is about a father, a son, and an old school playbook for modern times. It's really looking at these important values that we could look at and say, can they be a guiding light in these times that are less civil, less connected, and challenging. So, and I think there are some basic learnings there that are really good. So it's going to be a storybook about some of his stories, some of my stories, and some insights to scholars as well as they think about this.
I love it.
And it just went to publishers. It's a book proposal. It just went to publishers this past week. I hope, they like it.
Someone will like it.
Hope they like it. And now I have to write it.
No, that's amazing though. And I didn't know your father. I mean, I had met him, but everyone who I know who has met him always spoke about what a gentleman he was and how interested he was in the people around him.
He would sit and ask questions, like regardless of anyone, whether it was the camera guy or the sound guy who's here, he would want to sit down and talk to you, and he would ask questions about your life, what you're doing. And when I was a little kid, we used to go to visit McDonald's.
Yeah.
And he would sit, we would walk around and he would sit with the customers. How's your day? What are you doing today? What did you eat? How was the service? We'd go back and talk to the employees. And he would do that with whether it was a customer or employees, and he loved it.
It's so important.
It was part of his DNA. And that was a great lesson for me too, because when I became commissioner of the CFL, which is, a great, the league's been around for over 100 years. I wouldn't say it's it ebbs and flows, but in some of these towns like Regina or in Hamilton, more of a working class league, people were like, oh, here's a guy with a silver spoon in his mouth coming to be our commissioner. Even though I had worked for Major League Baseball and the NBA.
You've earned your stripes.
And I earned it. So I took a lesson of that old school playbook, and I only sat in the stands. I only sat with the fans. I every year I would do 10 phone calls or 90 phone calls to each team asking, give me 10 season ticket holders that I'll call to say thank you. And I would call them and say, this is the commissioner calling. A lot of times people would hang up.
This is a prank call.
Not thinking it was me. And then I say, no, call back. And they get the CFL offices. I would do tweet ups. I did one in Regina where I said, I'm in Regina for the game. Meet me at this bar and I'll buy the first round. Well, 400 people showed up.
That's awesome, Mark. Yeah.
So I learned that from him, and I think that helped me in my career at the CFL.
Yeah, I was going to say it's so smart, but it's not. Yes, it's smart, but it's genuine. That's what makes it valuable.
And that made the job more fun. If you're sitting in Ivory Tower and you're not connecting, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what the fans are thinking. I mean, I was the first commissioner. Every year you had a state of the league for the media, and like 50 media would come in the room. I said, once that's over, I'm going to open up the ballroom, and we'd have 500 fans come in, and they would grill me for an hour, and I'd talk to them and I'd learn. And I think that's the only way, whether, it's called like learning it in the streets. You got to walk the streets. You got to walk the floor of the factory.
Know your
I mean,
audience,
that's really, walking the hallways goes back to the Industrial Revolution when factories, and this is part of the research for the book, when factories got so large that they didn't know what was going on, so the manager of the factory would walk the floor.
Oh,
so that's where that expression comes from. So I think you have to do that to be able to be connected in your business.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've learned in speaking to people over my lifetime is that the more that you can listen to other people, the more likely you'll find success.
True.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, people don't like, I'll stop talking now.
No, that's why you're here, is to talk. So please don't. That'd be awkward.
People don't like people who are always talking.
Yeah.
You kind of roll your eyes. You're like, and we all know those type of people.
Well, yeah. Should we put a list together? We'll do it privately when we're not filming. Yeah, no, it's true. It's an insecurity when people speak to fill a room. When silence is typically more powerful.
That's true.
So when you lost your dad, that must have been a pretty pivotal moment in your life to reflect back on his life.
Yeah. I mean, it's been better than I thought. What I mean better than I thought is I was very fortunate that nothing went unsaid between us.
That's a gift.
Yeah, a gift. I was very lucky. We were there right to the end. He died when he was 86. I was there in the room with him, and up to those, he got ill towards the end, but we always spoke. My dad, he had a philosophy that if his kids called, and this was growing up from a little kid, when he was building McDonald's, Nancy Serberlin, who was his assistant for almost 30 years, for 26 years, she knew to interrupt him, like whether he was in a board meeting, whether he was talking to the prime minister. So we had that confidence. And as life went on, I would say the last 10 years, Dad and I would FaceTime every day. I'd be traveling. He would call every day. So we had that type of relationship. So it's interesting. I was thinking about, as we unveil his tombstone tomorrow, we're not going to be talking about what he was like. We're just going to update him. And Dad put us in, like, I'm doing well. My daughter is doing well. Yeah. Suzanne is doing great. And I think he set a foundation for us to be, to do well and have those basic foundations of family first, working hard, have your friends. And as I get older, that's really what you need.
Care about the people around you. Yeah. I think it's great that they're blowing leaves right outside the door. I think all of those ethos are wildly important. And I know your daughter fairly well, who is a remarkable young woman. And she was very close to her grandfather and very close to you guys. And does she clearly embodies the roots and wings philosophy, but is it something you actively talk about as a family?
Yeah, we do. I mean, she wears a cufflink of my father's. We redid it, and she wears it on her neck. So she was very close with her gramps. Yeah. We talk about those basic things. Like I when I dropped off at university, I said to her, I said, never forget, the type of person you are. I said, you have always surrounded yourself with good people.
Has she ever?
Like friends, and those girls or those boys that weren't good people, that didn't have the same values, you walked away from those people. So just remember that your friends are a reflection of you too. And I think her biggest challenge right now is, she had friends for years and years in high school. Is now finding those same people with the same values, who treat people the same way, who are not ostentatious and flaunt money or do any of those things. And that's why I think. But she's enjoying it. She's loving it, and now she just has to find her way.
It takes time, and our daughters were so lucky to have such a strong cohort of good people.
Yes,
and great parents, of course. But now, of course. But now they do have to find their way, and it's not easy. I don't think. I think the world is different than when we went to university,
and we probably hovered a little too much. Like, listen, if I think about. I was reflecting on my parents taking me to school. I literally think I got on a plane and flew to Chicago with my bags and unpacked and that was it. And I saw mom and dad, and I talked to them once every 2 weeks. And, and I think Parker now is going through that sort of independence of like, hey, mom, dad, don't keep on texting me. Don't call me, which I understand that. Like that's part of them developing their own wings and finding their way as well, which
disentangling or whatever it's
called.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I had booked to take Mimi to Dal for 4 days.
Right.
And about a week before, she said, 2 days is probably
2 days
enough.
Right. Yes.
I have parties I need to go to.
Yes,
so I went for 2 days, and it was a great 2 days. And then I realized I hadn't seen her face in, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks. And then she FaceTimed me yesterday. And I thought, oh my God. But it's that separation.
What did she want?
No, exactly. And we talked for like 3 minutes, but it was almost like she just needed to make sure I was there.
Right.
And then she's like, okay, I'm going back to work.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think they're both good kids, and I think they're great institutions. So they'll prosper.
They will prosper. Yeah. They'll do well for sure. Okay, so Suze, your amazing wife, is a connector of people in such a magnificent way. She was my first bridge probably at Branksome.
Oh, wow.
Who reached out and was kind. And there was other people too, but she was so good about it. And I don't know if you know this, but Suze, during COVID, she and I would go walking. And she was the first person I told I was getting divorced.
Oh, wow.
And we weren't that close at that stage of life. So we're closer now.
Like who got the dog?
Right. And I remember walking, and I told her, I said, so I've made the decision, and this is what's happening. And her reaction was like, oh yeah. Like it was just of course you are. Like there was no surprise. There was nothing. Yeah. Anyway, she's been an amazing support, certainly as a friend. And I imagine as a partner to you that it's allowed you.
Yeah, I mean, she's amazing. I mean, listen, we've been married 22 years now, and it's pretty amazing. A lot of our friends, I have very few friends that are divorced. Like in my YPO group, my YPO forum, all married and no divorce. And, some are, we're the youngest by 22 years. Some are 35, up to 40, no longer YPO. Yeah. Old PO.
Yeah, we call it gold. Just drop the G.
Yeah, exactly. But all of them are together. So, and Suzanne, do you talk about being a connector? I'd say sometimes even though I've had roles where I have to be outgoing and all that, sometimes I also will be the person that reverts back and says, let me go to the cottage by myself. I mean, with Susanna Parker, or even by myself, and I'll sit on the dock, or I'll go work out, or I'll go for a hike with my dogs and not be around people. Suzanne is definitely the better connector and has created this amazing group of friends that we have. And I think that has a lot to do with her personality, which has been great for me, being on the being I'm on the sidelines. I like maybe one step behind her.
I would
You know?
say you're a great connector of people too. Certainly, as I went through divorce, you're right. In our friend group, I don't think anyone else is divorced. I
Right.
think it's just me. There was a dinner party or two where people wanted even numbers, and Suze was like, "That's bullshit. I'm inviting you to
Yeah,
dinner."
exactly.
So you guys were always so good about that.
Good.
But I wouldn't have thought that you were behind Suzanne. I would say you were both
Yeah, well,
at the
thank you.
forefront. Yeah.
Well, sometimes she pushes me. She's like, Mark, go see your buddies sometimes.
Yeah.
She what was the movie? I Love You, Man. No, remember with where I like a lot of my old friends were my high school buddies.
Oh, yes,
old high
okay.
school friends. So Suzanne's like, Mark, get out.
Oh,
go
I
see
know.
the boys more.
Is it not? It's not old
it's-
school, but it's one of those. Yeah.
It was I think it was called I Love You, Man. But
Okay.
I
don't know that I've seen it.
Yeah, I think it was. It was a very funny movie. And she's
Now I'm gonna
like,
watch
a little
it.
bit like that where, Mark, you have a lot of friends, but like, do you have a lot of close friends? A lot of my close friends are like from my old days and they're all around the world. And so she pushes me to like, go play tennis with the boys or go have a drink. Or
I
go-
don't think men naturally do that the same
No,
way
I agree.
women do.
And I
Yeah.
speak to a lot of my buddies, some of my closest friends, and they're like, they like me have to sort of make the effort.
Yeah.
Like if am I going to call Mark or I'm going to sit and, do some work or just hang out and watch TV myself. And I think guys have to make a little bit more of an effort. And I'm trying to do that as I get older. One of the things I'm researching as part of the book is about communities. So blue zones are these zones in the, I don't know if you've heard about them.
No.
Right? There are areas in the world like in Japan and in Southern California and in Sicily and in Greece where the average population lives into the late 90s and 100 or even over 100. And they looked at some of the attributes of it. And a lot of it has to do with having family around, intergenerational, having close friends, having purpose. It could be a religion or some type of faith-based thing you go to regularly. It doesn't have to be religious, but something that where it's building that community. But friends were a big part of it. So as we get older, having your good group of friends and is really, so get it for us, getting up to the cottage and being around friends has been like, it's been good for the soul.
And it has truly built community. When I look at even our daughter's friend group, like largely driven through parents, friends, and their offspring, and it is intergenerational, I would say.
So it's important as I get older. You got to have your. I've been as we get older, and I've talked to my mom now, who's 86, about where are you gonna. We're not ready to retire because we got so much stuff going on. But like in the winter, you go somewhere, and we were like, "Oh, we love California, and we love," but but our daughter's in Florida. She's like, "Mark, one of the things you got to do is you got to be around people that are your friends. So if you think about going off to some place in the world, you're restarting. Just be prepared for that. And there is some excitement in that, but it's also got to think about, okay, do you want to be around those people that you love the most? And I think that's critical as you get older.
As you get older, it's funny. I'm starting to think about. I'm not there yet,
Right.
but where will I
go?
Yeah. What does the future look like?
Right.
But I have a big empty spot in my future. It's the person beside me. I don't know who that person is yet. So I don't know where I'm going. But I think about it. I'm like, well, maybe California would be fun. Or now Declan's living in Hawaii. I'm like, maybe I'll go to Hawaii and be a surfer. I don't know. We'll see where we go. I don't know anyone there, so maybe not. Going back to when we started and the importance of community and how phones have changed the world and how dating has changed. Do you follow Professor Scott Galloway by chance?
I know him, but I don't follow him.
Okay.
So,
it's an interesting follow.
Yes, I might, because I'm working with a ghostwriter and she follows Scott.
Okay.
But I should, because there are some, I don't know, I'll let you ask the
No,
question.
you say. I met him at a talk in New York and I was fascinated by his research and how he feels society is stripping men of their masculinity, which is undermining our entire society and how relationships are formed and how people show up to universities, and that the male population in universities has gone down and the female population of students has gone up, and how this impacts families. And anyway, there's just all this work he's done.
I should look into it because, Parker's at University of Miami and the president spoke, and I think it's like 52% girls, 48% guys, and they're having a lot of trouble recruiting more boys, more young men to the universities. I don't know if that, that
It all ties in.
It all ties into it. I was just going to make a comment about dating. One of the research that I looked into was Gen Z and the older millennials sort of getting away from dating apps. They're now starting to say, listen, I need to go back, and they're starting to have happy hours again. They're starting to have more parties. They're starting to say, friends, will you fix me up? Or let's have let's do double dating because this sense of connectivity is lost, and people are fed up with the curated look at a dating app. So there are some, and this goes back to the old school, there are some things that I hopefully are going back to some of those old school values that I think will create a little bit more balance.
I hope we're heading in that direction.
Yes.
I think it's so important.
We've gone one way too far, right?
Way too far, where everything is phone and lack of connection.
Yes.
And I know that a lot of the younger people in my life, like in their 20s, have joined the Toronto Run Club, which is a group of runners, and they run every morning or evening, and that's how they're meeting their dates.
Well, I know
I'm not a runner.
I know Suzanne. I know Suzanne when she lived in New York. That's not how we met, but she was in a running club. I was in a co-ed when I moved to New York City when I was in my 20s, a co-ed volleyball club, and that's where I met a bunch of people. Yeah. And it was, it's a great way. Like, those are the type of things you need to do. Really to break out and not to be, just sitting behind you and swipe.
Yeah, disposing, throwing you out. Exactly. Sue's told me that when she met you, she saw you and knew. Yeah. Did you feel that way?
Well, I think it was because of the puppy. I don't know if you know the story. So it's a great story. So I was like, okay, I had just actually called off a wedding. I was supposed to be, it was 6 weeks before. Part of the fight was over getting a dog. I'd grown up with dogs. I was a zookeeper at the Toronto Zoo here.
Oh, wow.
I led an expedition in the Arctic. I had studied and worked with a field scientist in the Ukraine with wild orangutans and semi-wild. So this was part of my life. And so I called off my wedding, got a dog. His name was Pongo because I'd just come back from Sumatra, and the scientific name for orangutan is Pongo pygmaeus lba. So I got a golden retriever, named him Pongo. I was living in New York City, went out to Montauk. Long day at the beach. There's a beach bar there called Cyril's Old Clam Shack. There was like a couple hundred people in the parking lot. I have my dog, my puppy with me, the best move I could ever make.
Yeah, smart.
I see this beautiful girl in the distance with her hat backwards. And Suzanne has those amazing, like a husky blue eyes. Yeah. We smiled at each other, and then literally the parking lot was so crowded. Everyone's drinking beer in the parking lot. That's America. Then it parts ways with people, and she sees the puppy, and she comes over and she, gives Pongo a little pet on the head, and then we knew. So, and if you remember this movie,
and that's so beautiful, by the way.
It was a movie called, I think, Swingers. Was it Swingers or Singles? No, Swingers. Yeah. And Vince Vaughn was in it. Oh yeah. And it was around that time, and Vince Vaughn and another actor, and it was all about when you meet a woman, you have to wait a little time to call her.
Oh, game playing.
Yes. So this guy in the movie doesn't wait, and he screws up. He calls right away, leaves like 20 messages on the machine. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, there was email at the time,
just invented
23 years ago. And so I write an email, and Suzanne and I realized we live 2 blocks away from each other in Manhattan. Oh. So I write an email to her from Pongo, basically saying, so "Dear Suzanne, thank you for, patting my head and rubbing my belly. Will you take me for a walk? And, we'll invite Mark along."
That's so cute.
And Suzanne didn't get that until she went back in the office, because it wasn't like there wasn't the access to email back then from your office. So she was a little upset with me that I didn't call right away. And then we realized that we were close, and then she broke up with her boyfriend. She had a boyfriend at the time. It's not scandalous. Ooh.
Yeah, this is
TMZ.
Yeah. But it was meant to be.
Yeah, and I was dating some other girls, and it was like done, lights out. Yeah.
It's funny, what's meant for you doesn't pass you by.
No. Right.
I really believe that in life.
Right.
What's meant for you will find you. And how long from meeting to marriage?
Meeting to engagement was 6 months, and then marriage was like 9 months after
That's
that.
amazing.
That was
yeah.
good.
And you guys are the most perfect couple.
We're trying.
Yeah, you're good.
We fight like everyone else, but we're doing good.
I used to say to my kids, if we stop fighting, that's when you should worry.
I agree.
Turns out that's true.
You gotta I actually think in marriages, and how is there a couch I can lay on?
Yeah, get down on the floor. Yeah.
I actually, and I tell this to Parker too. You have to talk about issues, and and fighting, as long as it's respectful fighting. And I got better as time went on, as I got older. But respectful fighting is good, and you hash out the issues, and don't go to. I mean, you can go to bed angry, but don't go to bed for many days angry. Like just maybe go for a long walk, if you need to alone, but. You got to talk through the issues. And if you talk through the issues, that's good. The couples that don't survive are the ones who don't talk.
They don't talk. They stop caring enough to talk.
Yeah.
I heard recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before, was you can go to bed angry. You can't wake up angry.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one.
And I thought that's good. Yeah. You can let it go while you're
I should
sleeping.
have to bring Susanna coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And then
then
the
it's
anger
good.
dissipates.
And it's good. So when do you mentor young children or like young adults who are getting into business?
Yeah. So I guess because I've been a chair of so many different companies.
Yeah.
I do mentor some of the younger CEOs at the time.
Yeah.
I just offered. So we were just at University of Miami, and there was a meeting that Suzanne and I were at with some parents, and the coach of the women's basketball team came to speak to us. And I loved her. She was amazing coach, from the Midwest, last coach in Toledo. And the women's basketball team in Miami was really good. Yeah. And she said, I'd love if there are any people in the room who would mentor some of the girls as they are thinking about their next careers post-sports. And so I went up and talked to her about, being the commissioner and working at the NBA. And I even told her, and she had the biggest laugh. So when I went to Northwestern, I went there. I was captain of the high school football team here. I was recruited to play football at McGill and U of T, but I went to Big Ten school and they were all great. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to play football here. The guy who was my position in high school there was like 6'5", 240. It's like,
wow.
Like, Mark, you're not a farm boy from Nebraska. You're a city boy from Toronto. And so I became a cheerleader. I thought, hey, that's a good way of meeting girls. And I was a bigger guy in the squad. All the other guys were gymnasts. But they started off, and this is what I was telling the coach of the women's basketball team. I said, they started off by having us cheer for the women's basketball team. That's as the JV cheer. So she's like, I paid at Purdue. You might have been cheering against me. But to answer the question about mentorship, I just spoke to her, and I'm probably going to mentor some of the women on the team and talking about sports and all that. So I love doing that.
And what would you tell a young person today who had an ambition, be it sport or business, how to achieve?
I think, it's a little cliche, but my dad always taught me that, like, if you have to really love what you're doing. If you wake up in the morning and you hate what you're doing, stop doing it. And my niece just quit a job, and she was, and her, my dad, her Gramps was not around, but I'm in the back of her head, she was listening to him. It's hard to find your passion. I think it's actually very interesting right now. So if you go back years and years, whether my father's generation or even some of my peers, people tend to stay in jobs for a long period of time. Young people today move every 3-4 years, but I have become like a young person.
You have reverse age.
Because I chair this company and I'm involved in this board and I'm writing this book and I do multiple things that keep me interested. And I think I tell people, explore different opportunities, get outside your comfort zone, get outside your box, ask questions, and try and find a mentor too. Like, it's really important. If you have a bad boss, that's awful. Like, so try and, when you're interviewing, try and find people that, again, share the same values that you're inspired by, that you feel that you could work for too. Yeah.
Do you have a mentor outside of your father?
Well, some have passed, but it would have been my dad. It would have been David Stern, the former commissioner of the NBA, who I worked for 6 years. He was, he gave me such great advice as well. When I became commissioner of the CFL, David, I reached out to him and TSN interviewed him and because they knew I'd worked for him, but I spoke to him privately and he said, Mark, you're a nice guy. But he said, when you become commissioner, you have to be a bit of a prick your first year. He said, because you're too nice. He said, everyone's going to be testing you. The owners, the players, the union, the refs, your partners, they're all going to be testing you. And he was right. So in the first year, I find a bunch of players, I push back on the union, I find a bunch of owners, and it sort of set the bar for my tenure. So David was a great mentor of mine, but also a great person. He had the same values of my dad, where he talked about the power of sport to do good in the world.
Interesting. Okay.
And I learned that. So one of my territories at the NBA was Africa. And I took Hakeem Olajuwon and Dikembe Mutombo down to South Africa to do a clinic. We went into Soweto.
Yeah.
We spent a day in Soweto, a township of very poor. And we had hundreds of kids doing a basketball tournament there.
How neat.
And at the end of the day, this little boy comes up to Dikembe. Now, Dikembe is 7'2".
Wow.
And he pulls his shorts and he says, Dikembe, can you come to my home? And Dikembe looks at me. We had like about 45 minutes. I said, let's go. So we follow this little boy down this dirt road, and the homes there are as big as this living room, cinder block, no windows, tin roofs, and could be a family of 10 or 15 living in the house. So we follow them down. There's like a stream of people following us, and we go into the doorway. The doorway is sort of those beads. There's no door so you push them aside. We go in, and it's one large room with a bunch of cots there, little stove, and multi-generationals, grandparents, parents, cousins. And we go into the room, and now this is a room with dirt floors and cinder block.
I can picture sort of the shanty towns.
And I look up, and every piece of the cinder block is covered with newsprint of NBA players.
Oh, wow.
And at that moment, I sort of got very teary-eyed, and I was thinking of David Stern saying, the power of sport, of these athletes to inspire people, to give them a sense of hope and David had that. My dad had that when he talked about, doing good in the world. So those were two of my great mentors. Another guy named Steve Greenberg, who was my first boss in Major League Baseball, was another mentor. So I've been very lucky to have people that, have been a part of my life and sort of have guided me along the way.
Have guided you. I think it's amazing. I hadn't realized that you had such a deep history in sport. I don't know how I didn't know that.
Yeah, but it really was, in the States. That's where I was. Major League Baseball, the NBA. Eventually came back here for the CFL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, your love of animals. I know you have 2 dogs now. Yes. Do you still have that same path? Do you want to go work with orangutans again? Like, do you have that desire to be?
Yes. I mean, it's very funny. My brother and I have talked about this. I'm definitely with Suzanne, probably want to go on another safari. We went about a year and a half ago to the Galapagos, and it was an amazing, amazing family trip. So every year I want to do a few of those things. I think I got to, I interviewed about a year ago Jane Goodall. So Jane Goodall. So after I came back from Sumatra, I wrote Jane Goodall a letter saying, "This is who I am. I'm Mark Cohon. I worked for Major League Baseball and the NBA, head of international marketing of the NBA. I'd love to help your foundation." And this is the story how we actually came back to Toronto. I'd love to help your foundation. And she wrote me a letter saying, I'm going to be in New York on September 11th. So we were all set to meet on September 11th. I'm living in New York City, and it is the September 11th. World changed, trade towers come tumbling down. 4 days, we can't get in touch with each other. It's chaos in the city. 4 days later, she calls me, and she got through because the cell phones were down. I said, Mark, I'm still here. Will you come meet with me? So, and she said, my ATM card doesn't work. And this is her assistant, Mary Lewis, saying, will you pick up lunch? So I go and I get some cheese and bread, and I go down to their hotel on Lex and like 43rd. It's no longer there. And we hit it off. I figured out ways that I could, get more involved in whether wildlife research or supporting wildlife. And she said, well, there's this very wealthy Canadian I know who is building a wildlife rehab center named Robert Shad. So she actually comes up and introduced me to him. And the reason why Suzanne and I actually came back to Toronto, it wasn't the commissioner role. It was to help Robert build this wildlife center. So I did that, and then eventually got back into sports. So I have to, I have my 2 dogs. I haven't thought about volunteering. So when I was back in New York City, when I moved back from San Francisco, New York, I was a volunteer at the Central Park Zoo. I did the penguin talk, and I did the talk about the polar bears because I had worked, because I lived in the Arctic, and I also looked after polar bears at the Toronto Zoo. So at some point, I would say maybe I'll go back to a zoo and do some volunteer stuff because I love that.
I think I had no idea about any of this. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's very funny. People joke when I became commissioner that my best thing to prepare me was not working in the NBA or maybe it was being a zookeeper.
A zookeeper. A zookeeper and a cheerleader are two new ones for me. So
I'm revealing stuff. Hopefully when Suzanne sees this interview that, we'll stay very,
you will.
She knew about all that stuff.
So being in New York for 9/11.
Yeah.
It must have been
it was
absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it was terrifying. We were, my apartment was the Upper East Side. So I was working out of home. Suzanne went to her office in Midtown, and she went into her boss office and saw the towers come down, and then rushed up north. And then we were trying to get in touch with one of her friends, and it was so weird that on the Upper East Side and away from where it happened downtown, everyone was out on the streets. Like we were all out, like, trying to find the people were putting posters up of friends, have you seen this? But I remember one of our friends, she walked up all the way, like her building was right next to the Trade Center. Yeah. And she walked all the way home and she met us and she was covered in soot. And all she wanted to do was sit at a bar and have a drink with us and be around people. It was shocking. So it was terrifying being a part of that. And I remember the night before I had come home from a vacation, landed at Newark Airport. It was a full moon over the Twin Towers coming in from Newark. It was the most beautiful evening and the next morning was a beautiful day. And then the world changed. So
did it ever change?
Yeah.
And so surreal, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was at my office. And at the time, I didn't have my own company. I was working in a different company. And my boss said, come and see what's happening. And I remember watching it on TV and thinking, no, this isn't actually a thing. This can't be happening.
Right.
And at the time, we didn't know the intent, whether it was an accident, whether it was, and then all of a sudden, everyone knew, and the world did really change.
Yeah, yeah. So we're in a tough place. Yeah, we're in a tough place now. Being Jewish, it's like Parker. After October 7th, took off her Star of David, which was very hard as a family that she was wearing. So I think getting back to the issue, we have to communicate. We have to have dialogue. We have to break down barriers. We have to talk to people. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are things we have to do to get over where we are in the world today. That seems very simple, but I think it's something that has to happen.
It has to happen. I literally just got tears when you said that Parker had to take off her Star of David to feel safe, I assume. Mm-hmm. It's something I talked about with Matt as well, Matt Cohon, our mutual friend. Mm-hmm. The school his daughters go to was targeted.
Right.
It's shocking to me that this rhetoric exists today.
And Parker's at a university now where I think she feels good about being there. But these issues, people have to continue to talk about them and not create these barriers that are being and villainize people. That's the issue right now.
When I talk about it too much, it's probably on every podcast, but the power of having hard conversations and being able to sit in a space and be deeply uncomfortable, but work through the hard conversations is a superpower that we just have to...
Yeah, keep on saying it.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable, but I think we have to learn to do that if we want change.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, well, I've loved having you. I know you have a very important appointment you need to get to. Yes, thank you, Mark.
I loved it, and next time get Suzanne.
I will.
She's more entertaining than me.
She's hilarious. I will have Suze, actually, for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.